What's good, YouTube? Steph here. Welcome to Theta Space. It's been a minute since my last video, and even longer since I uploaded something that wasn't just a bass guitar cover. But life has been happening at me lately, and I've just been struggling to keep up. As far as potential content goes, Kenso dropped a brand new album 2 months ago in the middle of November, and I meant to review it, but I haven't been able to carve out enough time to really listen and process it, so that's not happening right away. Also, about a month ago, I meant to review the debut science fiction novel by Samantha Mills, The Wings Upon Her Back, but I sat on that one long enough that it's no longer fresh in my mind. I'll get back to it, but today I'm going to review another science fiction novel that I read more recently, The Mars House by Natasha Pulley. Pulley is a British author who published her first novel almost 10 years ago in 2015, The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. It's the first in a trilogy that continues with The Bedlam Stacks, and it concludes with The Lost Future of Pepper Harrow. The Mars House is Pulley's sixth novel, published in March of last year. And as far as I can tell, it's her first work of actual science fiction. Her earlier works appear to be either historical fiction or alternate history. The Mars House is set sometime in the future. The year is not specified, but it's a time when Earth is in environmental collapse from climate change, and Mars has been colonized. Our protagonist is a man named January Stirling. He's the principal dancer for the Royal Ballet Company in London. London is in a state of pretty much perpetual flooding. We're informed that it's been that way for decades, and at the beginning we follow January as he catches a ferry boat outside his second-floor bedroom window one morning, and he commutes to the Royal Opera House where his company's working on a production of Swan Lake. The flooding gets so bad over the course of the day that nobody can get home, and the company is stranded and having a hard time foraging for food. They end up marooned on a rooftop for over 2 weeks, and when help finally arrives, January is offered asylum in Tharsis, the Chinese colony on Mars. The refugee situation on Earth is pretty dire, but Mars needs immigrants because there's more work than there are people to do it. He'll be housed, fed, and put to work, and that's a better deal than he'll get in England or anywhere else on Earth. And also he knows that there's no water on Mars, which at this moment sounds pretty bloody marvelous to January, so he agrees to go. Tharsis is the only surviving colony of an original 4 that were established on Mars in the past. Being a Chinese colony, the primary language is Mandarin, although Russian and English are also widely spoken. Most notably, the Martian natives, called naturals, use they-them pronouns, and they view gender expression as archaic or even primitive. In fact, the first Martian colonists genetically modified the extreme gender traits out of their children, so nobody presents overly masculine or feminine. Mars' gravity is only about a third of Earth's, so the naturals are physically much weaker and more fragile than Earthstrong humans. That's the term used to describe them. Because of this, Earthstrongs have to wear resistance cages when out in public to damp down their strength. Earthstrong people are effectively an underclass on Mars. They're not allowed to vote, they're not allowed in certain public spaces, and they're only permitted to have certain jobs, basically just manual labor. January works in a factory that fuses hydrogen and oxygen to create water. His co-workers are other Earthstrong people. At work, they can take off their cages and put their strength to good use. And his apartment is in what used to be a cooling tower for a decommissioned nuclear power plant. Tharsis is powered entirely by solar energy. Earthstrongers can become full Martian citizens if they opt for a procedure called naturalization, which weakens their physiques to that of a Martian natural, but the process dramatically shortens lifespan, like by about 20 years. And it carries a risk of crippling the subject in other ways, such as wheelchair confinement, heart problems, brain damage, just to name a few. The other main character in the story is Aubrey Gale, a senator whose house owns the solar farms that power Tharsis, and Gale is running to be consul, which is the title of the colony's top leader, basically president. Gale favors Tharsan independence from Earth and China, and also advocates banning resistance cages and mandating naturalization for all Earth immigrants. They cite statistics on how many naturals are killed by Earthstrong each year, and that's their proposed solution. Gale is very intelligent, charming, erudite, and witty, and enjoys spirited debate with someone who can meet them at their level. When they visit the water factory where January works, he's selected along with another worker to meet the senator and talk about what it's like working there. And the discussion turns to why not naturalize. January loses his temper and facetiously tells Gale, yes, I would murder you if I was in the shop with you. That results in him losing his job and being arrested for hate speech. He's lucky enough to get a judge who saw the broadcast interview and recognized that January was baited into his angry response. The judge comments, just because Senator Gale uses a wheelchair sometimes does not mean it's okay for them to run over puppies with it. So January is sentenced to only 2 weeks in minimum security, but his life is still ruined. With a criminal record, he can't even get manual labor jobs anymore. So his options are naturalize or get deported back to Earth. He really doesn't want to go back to Earth, so he makes an appointment at the Naturalization Center. Meanwhile, in the next consular debate, Consul Song, the sitting consul, calls Senator Gale out for ruining a man's life because they can't take a joke. And Gale seems honestly surprised that January was fired and arrested. So they approach January before he can keep his naturalization appointment, and they propose a 5-year arranged marriage contract. So January can be Gale's consort and stay on Mars without naturalizing, which will also make Gale look better in the campaign for consul because they took a hit in that last debate. Noble houses in Tharsis are not exactly dynastic. Positions are inherited one generation to the next, but not by bloodline. Successors are typically adopted orphans, and the houses subscribe to the heir and a spare school of thought, calling them Apollo twins. I'll read from the book here. Apollo twins, as in Apollo and Artemis, the archers from the old stories, were common in great houses. A house needed an heir and a spare, so they usually adopted 2 babies at one go, generally born on the same day or very close together but not actually related. They had identical educations so that one could take over from the other at any point, although some studies had suggested this was a bad idea, given the unusually high mortality rate among the older twins. Watch out for Artemis was idiom now. It meant, be careful of the person right behind you who can do your job just as well as you. There's a mystery about Gale's former consort, Max Song, a member of the current consul's house. The official story is that Max ran away with River Gale, Aubrey's Artemis sibling, but it's generally regarded as implausible, and rumors abound that something more shady happened, probably murder. The rest of the story involves a conspiracy, political maneuvering around the consular election, including sabotage of the Martian weather system, and we also get to learn what really happened to Max Song and River Gale, but I'm not going to spoil the plot. I'll just mention that the main plot is resolved satisfactorily, but the last chapter leaves the final point of drama open, and it's left to the reader to guess or hope what comes next. There's another interesting science fictional element in this book. It's a device called the halo, which picks up particular brainwaves and projects them to a receiving device so that the actual thoughts of the wearer are visible. It's typically used as a truth detector on humans, but it works on any sentient being, including dogs and the giant mammoths that have been recreated Jurassic Park style and roam the Martian deserts and forests. The halo device works to the degree that actual interspecies communication is possible. This happens to be very significant to the plot later on. So obviously the main themes here are environmental catastrophe due to global warming, the social issues surrounding immigration and refugees, and the divide between the obscenely wealthy and the common poor. There's even an incident of terrorism when an angry Earthstronger tries to assassinate Senator Gale over their mandatory naturalization position. There's also a romantic subplot between January and Gale. It's not front and center in the story, but it is there, and maybe I'm just particularly attuned to it because I've read a few actual romance novels in the past couple of months. These particular romance tropes here are fake relationship, class gap, and my personal favorite, enemies to lovers. I've discovered that I really enjoy witty dialogue between 2 people who don't like each other very much. Although it's pretty clear that Gale places a high value on their relationship with January, and not just because it's politically convenient. The non-gendered pronouns of Martian naturals reminded me of Anne Leckie's Imperial Raj trilogy, the one that starts with ancillary justice, in which everybody in the high civilization parts of the galaxy, whether male or female, uses she, her pronouns. That was an aspect of that series that I found confusing from the start, and I never really got used to. But the Mars House didn't confuse me as much. I wasn't bothered at all by not knowing Gale's biological sex, and January isn't either, even as he finds himself falling in love with them. One particular passage that I found significant and is central to Gale's character development is when January finds himself in a press conference justifying Gale's position on the dangers of Earthstrongers. Earlier, during the debate with Consul Song, Gale points out that there's actual historical example of what happens when a segment of a population is much stronger than the rest. It's the patriarchal subjugation of women by men throughout most of Earth's history. In the press conference, January acknowledges that his superior strength makes him a danger to naturals, but he goes on to say, "Nobody is bad for just existing. If you're born a man, you're not evil because you could hurt a woman, only if you do. If you're born rich, you're not bad just because you could exploit poor people, only if you do. And if you're earth-strong, you're not bad just because you could hurt someone natural. I think any kind of strength means you have to be careful around people who don't have it. That's just being an honorable person. I have to be careful of the strength in my bones, and other people have to be careful of their power and their money and their intellect." I liked this book a lot. The story was engaging. I found January really sympathetic, and Gale was very likable, even though I was in accord with January and regarding their politics abhorrent. The twist near the end where the mystery was explained took me by surprise, but it did give me enough information to solve the other main mystery, the ghost story, on my own before the narrative got to it. And then there was the last bit of backfilled exposition where we got the story from the perspective of a different character. I thought that part dragged a little bit, but it didn't bring down the story for me. Pulley's prose is pretty straightforward overall, with occasional sparks of humor, but there are occasional footnotes in the book, 39 total across 58 chapters, that I found very funny. Like this one in the first chapter, when one of January's fellow ballet dancers is described as looking like a rugby player. This is not to be confused with football, either the European or the American kinds. Football is for waifs. Rugby is traditionally used as a way for small countries to remind everyone else why they would regret it if they invaded. Nobody wears any kind of protective gear. Players argue that actually more protection would mean nastier problems, pointing to boxing where gloves mean more people go for headshots. But of course the real reason is that this would get in the way of the whole point, i.e. killing the English. While I really enjoyed this book, it is Pulley's only science fiction work so far, so I'm not sure whether I'm interested in reading more from her just yet. But then I've never really been a romance reader either, and I enjoyed the hell out of the few that I've checked out recently, so maybe I will read more Pulley. I've been known to enjoy an occasional historical fiction or alternate world story. So have any of you read any of Pulley's other work? Would you recommend it? Do please let me know in the comments. I hope to refresh myself on The Wings Upon Her Back soon and get a review of that book done, so keep watching this space. I'm also practicing a classic new wave tune from the 80s on my bass, and hope to have a video of that soon as well. Until then, bright moments. Steph out.